Hey, what's up everybody, it's Axel, and today's video we're going to be talking about the BGVP NS10 Pro. So this is an IM that has 2DDs and 8 BAs for a total of 10 drivers, hence the name NS10 Pro. Now what comes in the box is you get this very nice looking carrying case. It has like a leather-like material, looks white, very nice actually, and inside you open it, it's actually kind of roomy, so you can add in the IM, add a dongle, add some ear tips, you know, there is space inside. And then you have these terminations for the modular cable, and then you get 3 nozzles. Now, the 3 nozzles kind of measure very similar to each other. The silver nozzle, one of them is longer or taller, the other is shorter, but they measure exactly the same. And the red nozzle kind of adds a very small difference on the graph, but to my ears, honestly, it sounded very, very close, if not exactly the same. So there you go, this is what the nozzle does. Now, in terms of the cable, now the cable here is pretty nice. Like you can see, it's made out of this very high quality material. The chin slider works and it's tight, stays in place. It's very functional, non-microphonic, you know, doesn't have a memory, and it doesn't tangle easily. It's actually a very, very nice cable. It feels nice, it stays on a desk. The only thing I wanted to talk about is this, you know, modular end of the modular cable, this termination. It looks kind of long, so when you insert it into the amp, you might want to watch out for that, because you might, you know, put some stress if you push it down. This could put stress on the connector of your amp or your dongle or your, you know, Bluetooth DEC amp or whatever, because it looks kind of long, you know. But it's very easy to remove and reattach. It's very nice. In terms of the earpieces themselves, this is how they look like. They come in with MMCX connector. That's very tight. And it's made out of metal. The whole earpiece is made out of metal. And the nozzle diameter is 6.3, which is, you know, average, within the average range for most IMs. In terms of fit and comfort, I have no issues with it. I think the design is very nice. And this nozzle, this is one I was talking about when I said it's very short. This is the short one. The other is a bit taller, a bit. So I had no issues with fit and comfort. I think it fits me very well. And now let's talk about the sound. So let's bring down the frequency response graph and talk about it. Now, you know, let's look at the sound signature. We find some focus on the upper mid-range. That's the first thing that grabs your attention, and that's definitely true, and I will talk about that in a second. Let me start by talking about the bass, because the bass of this IM is probably, for me, the most impressive part, because wow, like the level of punch and slam I'm getting from it is actually really nice. It's a very clean bass response. Doesn't overwhelm the mids, doesn't even have any bleed to the mid-range, so allows the mid-range to sound very clean. But man, is it punchy. And on the graph, it doesn't look like a lot, but it's a very punchy bass response. The slam is powerful, the impact is strong, and you know, the texture is definitely there, and even the sub bass is actually there. And it's a very enjoyable bass. It's one of those, you know, bass responses that make you, you know, enjoy the music. Doesn't intrude into the mid-range. You know, it's a very clean type of bass, but like the quality of it is a very punchy type. This is the type of bass that kind of always slams in the background, and that's definitely nice. Now, when we move on to the mid-range, you will see kind of after like 300 hertz, it starts going down. So there is a clean type of separation between the bass and the mids. And this allows the mid-range to sound very clean. Like there is no warmth, there is no thick note weight or anything like that, but it still doesn't sound thin or anything. But the part I want to talk about is the amount of it. Now let me start by first describing the mid-range itself. Now it sounds actually very detailed, very forward, perhaps slightly overly forward, but the quality itself is actually there. It sounds fantastic when the track calls for it, you know, and the track is not harsh or anything, doesn't have a lot of female vocals that are, you know, very extended. It sounds very nice. You know, you get the detail, you get the vocal forwardness, the instrument forwardness, and it sounds, you know, lively. Extended female vocals sound fantastic. And I agree, there's a lot of separation, and it sounds awesome. But the thing is the amount. The amount is, to my ears, most of the time, not most of the time, most of the time it's fine, but like the rest, let's say like 30 to 40% of the time, it could sound a bit too much. It could sound a bit, emphasized. It has like an excessive energy in the mid-range. And the part in the graph that kind of has that, if you look at the 2 to 3K area and the 4 to 6K area. So depending on what you're listening to, this might come off as a bit elevated, as a bit too energetic, maybe even edgy. Or it might come across as fine, like with gentle music, it's fine. With a lot of tracks, it's fine. Even with instrumental music, it sounded fine. But some instruments came across as a bit too much, like violins, flutes, high piano notes, and even saxophones, the upper end, came across as a bit too much. For example, powerful female vocals like Adele, Sia, for example, they have powerful extended voices, and to my ears it came across as a bit too much, a bit too powerful, a bit too forward. So this is the part where I feel it's not going to be for everyone. This is for people who want, and they know they like a forward mid-range, they like that highlight, they like that elevation. They like that the way it portrays the vocals and the instruments. For me, I kind of wish this area was a bit lower down, to, a bit more relaxed, to make it, more gentle, so that I can listen to it, raise the volume, and listen to a lot of genres, and I have no issues. That's what I, would have loved to see even one of the nozzles do. But what is there in terms of detail is very detailed, and it's very emphasized, very clear and clean. This is a clean sounding mid-range. Now, when it comes to the treble, this is another impressive aspect of it. It's not exactly an airy type of treble presentation, but it's not dark either. It kind of comfortably sits in between in a very nice area where it gives you the detail, the highlight, but doesn't become the star of the show, doesn't become overly forward, doesn't become too much, doesn't become harsh. Like it sits in an area where you get the highlight, you get the detail, like cymbal crashes sound fantastic. They sound exactly as they should, not emphasized and not dark, just where they should be. And I kind of like that. Like I like the treble presentation of the NS10 Pro. In terms of detail and separation, actually, it's very detailed. This IM is definitely very, very detailed. For the price, it can compete with other IMs around this price range in terms of detail and resolution, and the separation is actually very impressive as well. Another aspect that actually I didn't see this one coming, but it's very impressive for it, is the imaging. This IM has actually great imaging, and you can get those, spatial cues, very precise, I don't know, maybe because of the treble, it has that quality, maybe because it's tuned that way, but it definitely has a very precise imaging that makes me, pay attention to it, because I notice even the vocals are going from the left and right side, and even on live music, you kind of feel, these spatial cues moving in front of you in the sound field. So that part is nice. The only thing I wish was just the mid-range to be a bit toned down, because for me, there is just excess energy here. Now, let's start the comparison segment. I will start with the first comparison. Another IM around the same price range that has 8 drivers and comes in at a very similar price point, which is the Myer Audio D62. So the Myer Audio has 2 dynamic drivers and 6 balanced armatures versus the 2 dynamic drivers and 8 balanced armatures of the NS10 Pro. So basically, the difference is this. In terms of the bass, both have different presentations. The D62 has that deep bass. That's the only way I'm trying to describe it. It has a depth, an element of depth to it. It's a deep bass that has a long decay, kind of lingers, and gives you that powerful, meaty, weighty type of bass response. High quality as well. Both of them have great bass, to be honest. But the NS10 Pro is more about the speed and the punch and slam. It's like in your face, like boom, 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 and its punch is harder, the impact is stronger. So both of them are different here. In terms of the mid-range, the D62 has some warmth going on in the mid-range, just slightly, to give it a bit of a thicker note weight, whereas the mid-range is a bit cleaner on the NS10 Pro. But what's interesting is that although they kind of look similar on the graph in terms of the upper mid-range, to me, the D62 comes across as more energetic. Like, there are some tracks that I could play on the NS10 Pro and I have no issues with it. But on the D62, they sounded a bit too much. They sounded a bit too energetic. But they are definitely close, and they both highlight, and emphasize the upper mid-range in a way that just pushes the mid-range kind of in your face, if you will. So both of them share that, but they differ in terms of the treble. I feel the treble of the NS10 Pro is a bit more natural sounding, a bit more balanced. Like, it sounds really natural to me. It doesn't emphasize the treble, whereas the D62 has what I call, an airy, overly airy even sometimes, treble. Like, it definitely pushes that treble and emphasizing it. While it's not sibilant on the D62 or harsh, but there is an emphasis on the treble, and it kind of grabs your attention when you're listening to the music, and sometimes even could sound a bit splashy on like tracks that have like repetitive cymbal crashes, like could come across as a bit splashy sometimes, but not harsh, but puts a lot of air out there. So the sound signature overall is different. So that's the difference. In terms of detail, they're close. They're very close, actually. Both of them have a maybe just the NS10 Pro, maybe just a touch more detailed, or maybe it's not that detail. Maybe it's slightly like 10% more detailed, or at least to be more accurate, maybe the imaging is better. That's what makes you perceive the details, in a very precise way, but very similar level of technicalities, honestly. But just the imaging highlights things in a more precise way, whereas the imaging on the D62, I would describe it as good, decent, nothing that stood out to me personally. Now, another comparison I wanted to mention is the Awful Performer 5+2. Now, this is a case of preference. Okay, this is definitely a case of preference. And I will say my opinion, my preference, I love the Performer 5+2 much more for... It just balances everything I like to see in a sound signature, like gives me that bass. It's tighter, it's more controlled, higher quality as well. 2DDs, but it has the texture, it sounds a bit more controlled. And it has the sub bass, so it's definitely more enjoyable. And the bass adds some heft and weight, or at least, let's say, proper note weight to the mid-range, where I feel I enjoy it much more. Like the proper note weight affects the body of the instruments and the richness of the male vocals and the instruments as well. So this is another plus for me. In terms of the upper mid-range, it's a bit more controlled. The upper mid-range of the Performer 7 is where I like to see it. All right, it's a bit gentle, still highlighted enough. Like, it doesn't look like a lot on the graph, but there is some element of enough vocal forwardness that makes you feel it's enough. And because of the great instrument separation, it stands out in the music, so you don't feel that you want them to be more forward than that. And it gives you enough headroom so that you can enjoy yourself, raise the volume, listen to anything like rock, metal, no issues, raise the volume, enjoy yourself. Female vocals sound fantastic. They get that lively extension, and you have no issues with it. It sounds comfortable to my ears, and it just fits my preferences better. And in terms of the treble, again, the Performer 7 just is smoother, and it has the planar quality, so very fast transients, very incisive treble, more detailed, and it has some element of air in it. It doesn't look a lot on the grab, but still the treble of the Performer 7 just grabs your attention because of the way it renders and reproduces the music in a very, very incisive and detailed way, It's kind of hard to describe, but for me, I like the Performer 7. It just has the fun factor. The mid-range is tuned where I want it to be, and the treble, again, gets the attention without being harsh, so it gives me everything I need. In terms of the detail, again, the Performer 7 is more detailed with better separation, and even the soundstage and imaging is a step above. So it costs a bit more. So that is something I wanted to mention. Maybe the NS10 Pro has a modular cable. That's the only difference. But for me, I would choose, honestly, the Performer 7. It's just a much better sound quality to my ears. The vocals sound correct, have the fullness they deserve. The note weight is just perfect. And the balance of the tonality, just a bass boost to make it fun. But just everything is just exactly where I want it to be in an IM. So that's it, guys. That concludes our review of the BGVP NS10 Pro 10 drivers. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. If you have any question, leave it down below and I'll get back to you. And until then, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.